Howdy, my totally as always tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video. And today we're going to be looking at a beloved series of fighting games. We're going to be looking at the Fatal Fury series of games. For the uninitiated, Fatal Fury is a series of now old fighting games from the 90s developed by SNK for the Neo Geo hardware. The original Fatal Fury was actually a response to the original Street Fighter, releasing all the way back in 1991. Fatal Fury would really be SNK's main franchise until King of Fighters would take over and become really SNK's main franchise for life. Now, Fatal Fury was coming out when the fighting game genre was really just kind of getting on its feet and getting started, and then of course they would release games when the fighting game genre would have a boom. Fatal Fury's gimmick to stand out would be that it has different planes. You could go to 2 or 3 different planes and fight on those, similar to a 2.5D platformer like Little Big Planet. And it certainly was a unique gimmick, as I don't think any other series of fighting games has done anything like this, and it still stands out even nowadays. For a lot of people, Fatal Fury though is one character, and that character is Terry. Terry has been the main character of Fatal Fury since day one. He's the one that was put into Smash Brothers to represent not only Fatal Fury but King of Fighters and SNK, and a lot of people just associate Terry with Fatal Fury. Now, while Fatal Fury never reached the mainstream heights of, say, Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, the series is still a cult classic series that still has its fans even nowadays. Yes, all of the games were released in the 90s, but there's still some pretty good fighting games here that absolutely hold up. And so I thought today I was going to rank all of the Fatal Fury series from worst to best. Outside of re-releases and compilations, there are 10 Fatal Fury games, and we're going to be looking at pretty much everything here. How do they hold up? How are the controls? Are they still fun to play? Do they have good multiplayer? What improvements did they bring to the table? How's the character roster? We're looking at pretty much everything. I'm sure people are going to have some pretty wildly different opinions on this franchise and my takes, so, just let me know down below what your favorite games are, your list, or why you choose one game over the other, all that good stuff. Like, share, comment, sub, all that great stuff too. Now, let's just get right into it. What do I think is the worst of the Fatal Fury series? Unfortunately, I think the weakest of the Fatal Fury series is the original Fatal Fury King of Fighters, releasing initially for arcades in 1991. The original Fatal Fury coming back to it, it's a bit difficult. Now, 1991, that's pretty early for a fighting game. The genre was really still just getting started, and there really wasn't any other fighting games outside of Street Fighter, and I think Street Fighter 2 was like brand new when this game came out. And so, you gotta limit your expectations and keep that in mind, but really there's just no way you look at this game and it's not the weakest of the entire series. And it's not even that this game is unplayable or awful, it's just that all the other games really are better. This game's main competition was Street Fighter 1, not Street Fighter 2, and I mean, I'd rather play this than Street Fighter 1, so they at least accomplished that. But my biggest issue with the game, and the most obvious issue, is how clunky this game is to come back to. It is stiff. Like, holy shit is this stiff. It is awkward, it is clunky, it is stiff to do legit anything in this game, whether it's an attack, a special move, switching the planes, blocking, jumping, it is all stiff, and it is very hard to get used to. Now, Fatal Fury, its unique gimmick to try to stand out was that it would have multiple planes. You could switch between 2 planes, like kind of the foreground and the background, and you could have fights going on in either one, but I'll be real, it feels very poorly implemented in this first game. You just kind of flick the stick to jump to the other plane, but it's so awkward. My biggest issue is that you can't even do it yourself. Only the AI can switch planes. When you fight another person, if you actually have another person to play with, you just can't switch planes, at least not to my knowledge. So you end up with a scenario where the AI just keeps plane shifting on you and you're just trying to catch up, and by the time you catch up, they'll probably hit you with a special move and whoop your ass. This game has no combos, no strings, nothing like that. There really is just special moves and the normal attack, and you really want to use your special move because it does like 3 times the damage of a normal move. Now, the way the arcade mode works is every fight is kind of like a boss fight. Every single character has a certain gimmick to them, certain trait to them that makes it interesting. And yeah, it is interesting, this approach, but I wouldn't say it's exactly the most fun. This game is not fucking around. It will destroy you. It is a real quarter muncher, and it has no problem just absolutely annihilating you. There is a 2-player mode, which is really interesting, where a second player actually comes in to help you, but beware, there is friendly fire. You also can't play as any of these boss characters. Your playable characters are Terry Bogard, the main character, Andy Bogard, his younger brother, and Joe Higashi, a Japanese Muay Thai master. And like Street Fighter and I guess other fighting games, eventually they throw in some bonus modes here, like this arm wrestling that is just borderline impossible to win unless you get like a timeout. But hey, at least for the time, the graphics were pretty decent. I think the presentation is probably the best thing that holds up about this game, along with the music. The music is actually really solid, and it really started a lot of great tracks that SNK would be known for and would be remastered and remixed over the years. Like Geese Howard's theme. It's awesome. It's too bad Geese Howard is so freaking difficult in this game. He has no problem annihilating you also. So when it comes to the original Fatal Fury, it's very difficult to come back to, and if anybody's going to play it nowadays, I really would say just kind of skip it. Just play some of the later games. Like, it's a good novelty, it's a good history lesson, and if you want to see where the series got started, go right ahead. But I really do think all the other Fatal Fury games are better than this one. And so here we have Fatal Fury 2 releasing a whole year after the original. Fatal Fury 2 kind of picks up where the last game left off. There's another King of Fighters tournament, which was the premise for the original if you couldn't tell from the name, but yeah, there's another King of Fighters tournament, and a lot of the people from the first game enter as well. Now, the big question is, how is this game aged, and is it easy to come back to? Well, it's a little easier to come back to than, say, the first game. First off, they've changed the controls a little bit. Now you have light punch, light kick, strong punch, and strong kick, which is a bit more standard compared to what the first game had. They also have desperation moves, which is like your super, essentially, and it feels a little better. It's still very stiff feeling, I won't lie, and there's really not any combos or strings here. It feels still really hard to come back to. At least they made the plane shifting a lot better. It feels a lot nicer. You can actually do it yourself, and it doesn't feel as just weird as it did in the first game. It still does feel awkward, but it's not as bad there. Unfortunately, the AI will still spam the plane shifting, and you'll just be chasing them a fair amount in these fights. And while we're talking about the AI, yeah, this game is super duper hard. It is seriously not messing around. The AI will destroy you. They're button reading like crazy, and they just have no problem blocking any move you have and then just destroying you. And that 2-player where the second player comes in and helps you, yeah, that's not there. At least you have more fighters. You have more than just Terry, Andy, and Joe. You have Big Bear, who was a character from the first game. You have Jubei. You have Chang, you have Kim, the Taekwondo dude, and then you have Mai. Mai is the ninja girl, and she's probably SNK's most popular character outside of Terry. She's definitely their most popular female character, and probably one of the most popular female characters in fighting games. But she got started here, and you know, she will also kick your ass. But hey, at least the game, again, it looks pretty decent for the time. It looks a little better than the first game. The backgrounds are pretty cool. Frame rate can be a little suspicious. And the music, oh, the music is really good in this game. A lot of the themes really do slap. But in the end, I still wouldn't recommend Fatal Fury 2. It's just way too sensitive, it's way too stiff, it's still too clunky, and the game has no problem just destroying you, and it's really not new player friendly. I just wasn't really having any fun with this game. If you want to see a little throwback here where the series again got started kind of from, go ahead, but otherwise, yeah, I don't think it's worth playing. Alright, so here we have probably the weirdest of the Fatal Fury games. Here we have Fatal Fury Wild Ambition releasing for arcades in the PS1 in 1991. Now, Wild Ambition is very different from like all the other Fatal Fury games, really just for one fact. It's actually a 3D fighting game. It's a spin-off of the Fatal Fury series rather than being the main series, but yeah, it's a 3D Fatal Fury. The game is kind of a retelling or reimagining, I guess, of the original Fatal Fury in the King of Fighters tournament, where it added a couple people who weren't originally there and kind of fleshes out Andy and Terry's history with Geese, and yeah, it just kind of fleshes more things out, I guess. At least the cutscenes look decent, I guess. When it comes to the character roster, it's obviously a lot better than the original Fatal Fury. There's more than 3 characters here. Like I mentioned, they actually pull some characters from later games into this and say, oh, they were here all the time, but you know they weren't. But the roster's fine. They actually have Ryu Sakazaki as Mr. Karate from Art of Fighting 2, and I think the roster, I mean, I don't really have any complaints with it. Now, when it comes to actually playing Wild Ambition, that's where all the cracks begin to show pretty much immediately. Despite being a 3D fighting game, it still does feel like a 2D fighting game, and it doesn't feel anywhere near as fluid or smooth as, say, Tekken or even Virtua Fighter. You do have the axis shift, which kind of replicates it, but it just doesn't feel very good, like, at all. This really was when SNK was just kind of experimenting with 3D games, it seems, and you can kind of tell because it just feels nowhere near as good as really any of the other Fatal Fury games minus the original 2. It feels incredibly awkward, stiff, combos don't land like how you would think, the animations just don't always sync up, and it just doesn't really feel good to play. There's a few differences here from the main series when it comes to like super moves. It has like the heat meter, there's like the heat blow, and then there's the overdrive power, and they're a little different from like the main games when it comes to those super moves, but not all that different. I don't think it really adds much either. And when it comes to the general fighting, like I mentioned, it just doesn't feel very good. It's not smooth at all. And when it comes to this game's presentation, that's probably like the worst aspect of the whole game. It just looks bad. Like, even for the time, it didn't look very good. We went from these amazing sprites that SNK had basically perfected to these ugly, blocky 3D models that wouldn't look out of place in one of the older Tekken games, and this game came out way later than, say, even Tekken 3. I think the game doesn't look very good, but at least the music, the music mega slaps in this game. The music is actually just excellent, and it's probably the best aspect of the whole game, is how good the music is, because playing this game, I just didn't really have any fun with it, and I put it down pretty quickly. All my friends who I was playing these games with also didn't really like it and didn't even want to play it to begin with. And so with all this in mind, I just don't think anybody should try Wild Ambition, and it's really just kind of an oddity in the whole Fatal Fury series. Like, it's so different from the other ones, and not in a good way. Okay, and so here's a Fatal Fury that I don't hear anybody ever talk about, and that is Fatal Fury First Contact, which was released for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but you can play it now on the Switch in that collection. So Fatal Fury First Contact, now, I wasn't sure what the hell I was going to play. I was like, a Neo Geo Pocket Color fighting game. Doesn't that sound pretty bad? But you know, I tried it, I played a bit of it, finished the arcade mode, and I was like, wow, this is actually not half bad. This is actually pretty decent. This game is surprisingly good. Like, it's actually better than the old games, I feel like. Despite the limited hardware and technology, the series and fighting games, it just progressed enough to where we could actually have a half-decent fighting game on even the Neo Geo Pocket Color, I guess. It actually does feel fluid. It does have strings and combos. It feels much more fluid than 1, 2, or Wild Ambition. The character roster is half decent. You play through a 20-30 minute arcade mode, and there's even 2-player here. Now, of course, when it comes to the game's presentation and the music, it's going to be very compromised. Obviously, it doesn't look anywhere near as good. It doesn't sound anywhere near as good, and yeah, that does make it take a hit, but when it comes to its actual playability and when it comes to being a half-decent fighting game, I think that there's actually something here. The game is available on Switch in their Neo Geo Pocket Color collection, like I mentioned, which is how I played it, and I really just walked away very surprised with this one. I was just like, there's actually a decent fighting game on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Who would have guessed? And you know what? Should you play it nowadays? I mean, if you've got the collection, sure. Everyone else, probably not, but it's interesting nonetheless. And so here we have Fatal Fury Special releasing in the arcades in 1993. Now, Special really is just an updated version of Fatal Fury 2, and I think it's a little bit better than Fatal Fury 2. The game retains the general gameplay of Fatal Fury 2 with some much needed improvements, First off, the game does feel quite a bit better. Sure, it does still feel a little awkward and stiff at times, but it feels a lot better than the first 2 games. The game actually has strings and combos here. It's not just 1, maybe 2 hits at a time. No, you can actually do real combos here, which is, you know, pretty nice for a fighting game. It certainly feels more in line with what we would expect from a fighting game nowadays, at least. When it comes to the character roster, everybody from 2 returns, some characters from 1 come back, like Duck King, and yeah, it's pretty decent roster. It also has Ryu Sakazaki bringing in Art of Fighting as well, which would eventually lead to King of Fighters. And really, this is just the definitive version of Fatal Fury 2. Like, it plays better, it looks a little better, the music's still great, but really it feels a lot better, it's a lot smoother, and it's a lot easier to come back to than the first 2 games. And with that, I mean, if you want to try it out, yeah, I could actually say it's a fun fighting game to check out. Alright, and so here we have Real Bout Fatal Fury, initially releasing in 1995. This started the sub-series of the Fatal Fury series known as the Real Bout series. That's way too many series in one sentence. The game's story centers around another King of Fighters tournament with Geese back on top. Real original stuff here. When it comes to the gameplay, it feels decently similar to Fatal Fury 3. It retains the same plane shifting from Fatal Fury 3, where it's actually 3 planes rather than 2. The game does go down to 3 attack buttons, being a punch, kick, and strong attack, with the other button being the plane shifting. And Real Bout introduces a power gauge, which fills up as players perform normal and special techniques against their opponent, which is super similar to, say, super moves in like Street Fighter. Now, before it was the desperation move, which you could use like when you were about to die. Here, it's much more traditional. But there are some external factors that go along with it, like how full the meter is, how much life you have, etc. And you know, it adds something, it adds a little twist here, and then the game controversially added ring outs. This is very much like any other fighting game with ring outs where the match just instantly ends if you go to the ring out area, and I am conflicted about this. It's funny that you can get ring outs, and I've seen plenty of clips of people where they ring out themselves, but also, like, why would you do this in a 2D fighting game that's like I don't think it really belongs in Fatal Fury, and I think the ring outs ultimately are not a good thing. It also goes without saying, but I'll say it here anyway, there's combos, there's counters, there's legit reversals here. It feels much more in line with other fighting games, not only for the time, but what we expect nowadays. The game has a very good style to it, it's got a lot of flair. Unfortunately, when it comes to the stages, I think it's actually really lacking in this game. There's barely any stages. Sure, they look great, but like, why is there only a few stages in this game? When it comes to the characters, this game does not actually have any new characters. It has all of Fatal Fury 3's and a few extras thrown in from the previous games. Hey, at least this game isn't mad reading your inputs. It's nowhere near as difficult as, say, the first two games. The game looks pretty solid, it sounds good, it's got good music, but it doesn't really add anything to Fatal Fury. I don't think anything it added was substantial other than the ring outs. I mean, the specials, that's cool and all, but it's nothing revolutionary or crazy, and I think the game feels more like a re-release, honestly, than a next game. Still though, it is fine enough, and I think that if you want to play an old school SNK fighting game, you could do a lot worse than this game. Alright, and so here we have Fatal Fury 3 Road to the Final Victory, initially released in 1995. Now, Fatal Fury 3 really does try to build on the first two games and special to create a much smoother, better experience, and you know, I think they did just that. The plot is actually different, not involving a King of Fighters tournament, and instead is kind of like a treasure hunt for these scrolls and the return of Geese Howard. And you know, I think it's actually a pretty cool premise, and this game does have some dialogue between the characters, usually before or after the fight, and these are just absolutely hilarious. They're the corniest, just stupidest things, and I don't know if it was just a bad translation or what, but they were just hilariously bad. Now, when it comes to the character roster, it's half new, half old. We got classics like Terry, Andy, Joe, Mai, and Geese, really the most popular characters from the original games minus Duck King, and we got some new ones here like Bob, Hanfu, Blue Mary, and Franco. But yeah, I think it's a good mix. Now, Fatal Fury 3 really does kind of retain the same controls and format of Fatal Fury Special, but now it has 3 planes instead of 2, so the fights can get a little bit crazier and you'll find yourself going back and forth, but it's not that Looney Tunes shit from the second game. You can also control your jump, you can do air guards, and you have a new type of combo techniques known as combination arts, which allows the player to cancel a specific series of regular attacks from one to the other. All of this makes a much smoother experience, and this was really the first Fatal Fury where I was like, yeah, this is actually really smooth and it does feel nice. Of course, you know, it's not perfect. It does occasionally feel a little awkward, but yeah, it generally feels nice. It doesn't feel jank as hell. The game also isn't crazy difficult. Like, it's actually doable, and they're not mad button reading here, so that's always great. And the fighting in general is just more engaging. The game looks a bit better than the second game. The music continues to just be absolute banger after banger. The music is just really good in this game. I think Fatal Fury 3 is really where the series went from being, you know, it's an alright fighting game series to actually like a viable alternative to, say, Street Fighter or Capcom fighters. I think Fatal Fury 3 is actually a fun time, and I think it is worth trying for fighting game fanatics. Okay, and so here we have Fatal Fury Real Bout Special, initially releasing in '96. Not Fatal Fury Special, not Real Bout Fatal Fury, Real Bout Fatal Fury Special. Not confusing, I know. So this game is kind of more of an incremental upgrade on the original Real Bout, which was already kind of an incremental upgrade on Fatal Fury 3, but it does go back to some of Fatal Fury's roots. For instance, we only have 2 planes rather than 3, which I don't think we need 3 planes to be real. And the fighting again feels smoother than the first Real Bout. Not like way smoother, just a little bit smoother. Also, they got rid of the ring outs, which is good. We just don't need the ring outs here. Now you can push people up against the wall and really slam them against the wall to do more damage, and you can stun them easily. Stun has always been in Fatal Fury, but it's been seemingly random when you'd get stunned. Here you can like almost guarantee a stun when you hit someone up against the wall. But I still think this was done a lot better than the ring outs. That was just a little extra. When it comes to the cast of characters, everyone from the original Real Bout returns with a couple extra characters here from Fatal Fury Special. And while there is no new characters, it is cool that basically almost every single character from the original couple games has come together in this game, and some of them have been updated and they have some new moves. The fighting feels a bit smoother, the game looks a bit better, the music just continues to be fantastic, and I think that this, again, is a really solid fighting game, but it does doesn't really do all that much to progress the Fatal Fury series, and it again feels a bit more incremental, but I still think that it is a fun time. I would say that it is a better game over Real Bout and Fatal Fury 3 and is worth trying. Alright, so here we have Real Bout Fatal Fury 2 The Newcomers, initially releasing in 1998. Now, Real Bout 2 is very similar to the other Real Bouts. It doesn't change the name of the game. It doesn't really change up the Fatal Fury formula all that much. It just kind of refines and improves on it, making it smoother and adding some new stuff here and there. Something that Real Bout 2 has that the others didn't is it adds speed, a lot of speed. This game plays a lot faster than the other ones. It can feel very frantic at times, and sometimes I would say it feels almost even too fast, but I generally think the speed was a good addition. The game still has the two lines, the two planes of existence here, but you mostly fight on the main line, use the other one primarily to just dodge attacks or projectiles or things like that, and it just kind of goes to show that we really don't need the two different planes anymore. But hey, at least the Looney Tunes jumping back and forth bullshit from the first two games isn't here. You aren't really doing anything like that here. When it comes to how the fighting feels, again, it feels smoother, it feels very nice. It really does feel just about like a modern game. It really doesn't feel stiff or awkward for the most part. Now, when it comes to the character roster, I'm pretty sure this is the biggest roster in the Fatal Fury series. It has everybody from Real Bout Fatal Fury Special, which was already a fair amount, with Geese Howard returning officially, and then it has the two newcomers, like the title implies. These being Lee and Rick Stroud. These are fine enough. I'm not going to say they're like amazing additions, but it's cool that there's some actual new characters put in here, unlike the last couple games, which really didn't add any new characters. Everyone feels a lot smoother, there's some new moves thrown in, and I think that this was, again, just a really good time. And I know that this is some people's favorite Fatal Fury, and yeah, when it comes to the classic Fatal Fury games and that classic Fatal Fury format, I think that this is the best game of them all, where the plane shifting is involved in all of that. It has a good roster, it feels fast, it's satisfying, and it's just a generally good time. It looks great, it sounds great, the music is, again, I can't really say enough about the music in these games, it's just fantastic. But I really do think that this is totally worth trying if you've never tried it, not just for fighting game fanatics, but casual fighting game players as well, as I think it's pretty easy to pick up and play, and it's hard to master, and I think that it's actually worth trying. But then we have Garou Mark of the Wolves, released in 1999, which I believe is the best of the Fatal Fury series. Despite it not even having the Fatal Fury name in it, I think Garou Mark of the Wolves is actually a superb fighting game. This game is very different from all the other Fatal Fury games in a number of different ways, and I'm sure some of the more hardcore fans probably felt a little betrayed by all the changes that this game made, but in return I think we have, again, just an excellent fighting game that feels incredibly modern. You can come back to this game and it still feels incredibly smooth, way more than any of the other Fatal Fury games, and it just feels legit like a modern fighting game. Now, when it comes to the game's story, it takes place many years, like we're talking a decade plus after the original Fatal Fury games, and everyone's way older, and it's all about this new generation and a new King of Fighters tournament. When it comes to the character roster, the only character that returns from the old games is Terry. Legit, and nobody else returns. I mean, Terry was my favorite anyway, but yeah, nobody else returns. And while I am sad that there's really no returning characters outside of Terry, these new characters are actually great and they really do fit in, and a lot of them were previously mentioned in other Fatal Fury games. These aren't just brand new characters out of nowhere, they just weren't playable in the old games. Like, everyone feels incredibly different from each other, everyone feels super unique, no two characters even kind of come close to each other. It's really kind of amazing, and I really do like all the different characters here. And honestly, the gameplay is so good that, like, I just can't even be mad that a bunch of my favorites are missing, like Duck King. But really, when it comes to that gameplay, it is easily the most fluid and smooth of all the Fatal Fury games by like a landslide. It's incredibly satisfying, everything just flows together really well, and it just feels great. Like, it was just great fun playing this game. Another big difference from the other Fatal Fury games is that the planes are gone. The lines, the lanes, whatever you want to call it, they're just gone. It's traditional, it's one line, one-on-one, and you know what? It really goes to show that I think by the end of the Fatal Fury series, we really didn't need the lines with the planes of existence. We didn't need some gimmick because the fighting is actually just really good, and it allows this game to flow even better than the old games because of the absence of it. But Garou has a gimmick of its own. It has the tactical offense position, which is where you're able to highlight a special area of your life gauge, and when your gauge reaches that area, the character enters into TOP mode, which is where you can use your TOP attack, which is like a super basically. You can have gradual life recovery, and really you have increased attack damage, and you can choose where you want it to be on your life bar. There's actually a bunch of different strategies you can use with this, and I again think it's really unique and it's a good twist on the formula. And all of this really does lead to a different feel from the other Fatal Fury games. It's just very different. This game absolutely oozes personality and style, though. You can see it with that amazing sprite animation, the graphics in general, the stages, the music. Oh, it is great here. It is just so vastly different from what you've come to expect, and I think it still absolutely holds up nowadays. Playing through the arcade mode, it also holds up since the AI aren't crazy difficult, the game isn't crazy button reading, and then the multiplayer is great. The game also has online multiplayer thanks to all the modern re-releases. It even has rollback now. I'm pretty sure SNK knows that this really is like the best of the Fatal Fury series, and that's why it got all the special treatments that it's gotten, because it's just that great. I don't think it's the strongest roster in the Fatal Fury series. I think that's real Bout too, but when it comes to the gameplay, the style, and maybe even the music, oh yeah, no, it's not even close for me. It's gotta be Garou. Garou is one of the very best fighting games, I think, period, and it might be SNK's best fighting game. I don't know if that's a hot or a cold take, but I think it's very easily one of SNK's best fighting games. But that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your favorite Fatal Fury down below, or your favorite character or music or something. I know this is a bit different from what I usually look at, but you know, I had a lot of fun playing these games, and I thought I'd share my experience and rank them all. So everyone have a good day, night, whatever it is. See you later.